Good morning, everyone. Today is April 27th, 2023, and welcome to the New Possibilities Hour, part of the Will Work for Food project, founded by Natalie Armstrong-Motin in the spring of 2020. Every Thursday morning, Jean Lawler and I are delighted to host another cutting-edge webinar for mediators, arbitrators, lawyers, and everybody who negotiates. As you know, there's no charge for these incredible presentations. Rather, we ask you to make a comfortable contribution to a food bank if you like what you see. And so far, our audiences have been so generous with food banks around the world in honor of our great speakers. One of the best parts of the program, my favorite parts, is when we announce the running total of just how much our audiences have contributed to date. Jean Lawler, would you please do the honors?
Hi, good morning and good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Absolutely. We're getting so close to 400,000. It's just amazing. $390,000, $390,115.42. So that's well over 4 million meals. That's just amazing. Thank you so much.
Incredible. Thank you all indeed. And today we have another great presentation. We hope that those of you who are able will contribute. Today we have Rethinking Mediation with Ava Abramowitz of George Washington Law School in Washington, D.C. Here's the description. So much of what we do as mediators is based on the getting to yes process developed for negotiators. Basing our conduct on negotiation makes sense if you think of mediation only as facilitated negotiation. But mediation can be much more. It touches on areas as diverse as risk management, return on investment, emotional aspirations, and the angry desire for paybacks. The list is as complicated and as long as the list of people who get caught up in disputes. Maybe we can make more progress in understanding how disputes settle if we look to wisdom from other fields. And in this presentation, we will do just that. With Ava Abramowitz, a former United States attorney for the District of Columbia, Ava teaches negotiation and mediation at GW Law School in Washington, D.C., where she researches the communication behaviors used in mediations. I've heard Ava present at many conferences over the years, and she has consistently been one of the very best presenters, even among fields of dozens and dozens of programs. We've had her on the New Possibilities Hour before. We're here to learn the latest in her thinking. Ava, please tell us a little bit about the food bank to which you would like people to contribute if they are able, and then on with the presentation. The floor is yours.
I would love to. Go.
Perfect.
Great. Thank you very much. Jeff mentioned our research, and I'm going to tell you, first, I want to brag about Bread for the City. Bread for the City is a food bank, which with another of my favorite 501c3s, SEDEC, have worked together to create so much positive change for the people of the District of Columbia. The food bank part of it has also a free medical clinic, social work, free clothing, legal, dental, on and on and on and on. And it now serves basically 35,000 people a year. With COVID, they have been delivering 1,500 bags of food every day to people who are on lockdown. Their orchard is consistently growing, 50,000 pounds of fruit right now. And with food cuts and food stamps, they're scared. And they've started trying to think of what they can do to cut back. Please don't let them cut back. If you can give $5, $10, whatever, just give a vote for Bread for the City. It would be very, very much appreciated. So any questions about this at all?
We've put the URL for Bread for the City into the chat, Ava. It's breadforthecity.org. That's breadforthecity.org to make it easier for people to contribute. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Now, I don't know how many of you were on last week when my co-researcher, Ken Webb, was speaking. I am going to build on his proposal. It will not be the same. And since he's on, I will rib him and say it'll be better. So what he talked about was that in order to get a decision made, someone has to put an idea on the table. It's called initiating. Someone has to react to the idea. And if there's no sharing of information, there's no shared clarity what they're talking about, that's a guaranteed fight. But if there is shared clarity, the group can, by using all three behaviors, initiating, reacting, and clarifying, come to a decision that they want to live with. So I teach this to my negotiations class, and I teach this to my mediations class. And I'm going to ask you if you would use chat to vote. Out of the initiating behaviors, how many of you, by the way, are lawyers? Can you tell? Can you write yes or no, or give me a sense? And how many of you are non-lawyers? Jeff, is there any way to find out? Oh, good, I see 17, 18 are voting, 19, terrific. Because lawyers have one set of training and non-workers, psychologists, social workers have another set. And they will be using the same behaviors differently. Can you make a guess from what you've been seeing? Well, while they're counting, let me keep going. If you're a lawyer, and if you were well trained, you will not use all of these behaviors. You were taught some of them, you've been brought up to use them, and you will use them well. So let's look at initiating. Which one, if you're a lawyer, do you use more? Proposing or building on the proposal of somebody else? All in favor of proposing, say aye. Are you all on mute so I can't hear you? Oh, you're all on mute. Oh, that's awful. Usually it is proposing. We are taught to propose. I'm a lawyer, I'm smart. Here is my solution, and here's my proposal. Building on the proposal of somebody else, not so much.
Aye.
It's always better, I'm the lawyer. What about clarifying? When I ask my students, they say the number one thing they do is seek information. And that is really quite true. And so I say to them, do you seek information in order to develop a shared understanding? Or do you seek information in order to be able to find out something that you can use against them in a court of law? And they laugh, but they seek information strategically for the benefit of their case. And in terms of reacting, they are full agreement. Lawyers are brought up knowing how to disagree. So now I ask all of you, even if you're not a lawyer, how likely will you develop common ground and a shared solution if proposing, giving information, not seeking information, but giving information, and disagreeing are your three major ways of coming to yes? In honor of those who are British on the Zoom call, I will say, not bloody likely. You need much more than the world according to one person in order to get other people to want to live there. So which behaviors do you think are good at getting a group of people to get to yes? Well, proposing, if proposing is not number one, building on the proposal of another would get it. Seeking information really for the sense of getting shared clarity, testing for understanding to make sure you have it, certainly will help. And then finding some nugget you can agree on. You can support the person, you don't support the idea. You can support the idea if you do support the idea. But anything like that will help inch the agreement forward, because what it's doing is inching everybody's understanding collectively forward. Does that make sense? So in 2017, when the ABA research task force on mediation came out and said they had read 40 years of research and had no idea what makes a mediation work and what makes a mediation fail, I thought, I wonder if we can transform these negotiation behaviors into mediation behaviors. And with that, I called on my friend Ken Webb, who had worked with Neil Rackham, my husband, for 30 years, and said, how'd you like to join? It's an adventure. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. Do you want to do it? And he said, yes. So now we are close to the end of our capabilities. We have called in reinforcements, and the Resolution Systems Institute is going to help us. They're going to be observing live mediations with live people, not with actors, with live mediators, and they're going to be finding out what behaviors are used and to what end. And in order for all of us to be on the same page and to help the Resolution Systems Institute, in order for all of us to be useful engines in this search, I'm inviting all of you to come along for the ride. It is not easy because if you think about it, disputants have to make very high-risk decisions, often in very high-stakes situations, with absolutely no idea of whether a decision is going to be good, whether it's going to be implementable, and what's going to happen as a result. And in addition to that, that's not enough anxiety. They're doing this, watching the mediator and the lawyer making money in the process. For the life of me, I do not understand how we can put people in a room, shut the door, require them to sign confidentiality agreements, and not know what goes on in that room. It just blows my brain away. And when you realize how high the risk is to the disputant, it gets even scarier. And now, thanks to the Singapore Convention, they now can sue if they're not happy. But there's got to be a better way to handle mediation. And so I thought about it, Ken thought about it, Neil thought about it, and we decided if we went down to communication behaviors, at the bottom, not thinking about the global big issues, but thinking about how does someone put all the bricks together that will ultimately pave a road to yes, we might have a better chance of coming to an understanding of what works in the mediation and why it works in the mediation. Now, I presented this to one person and he said, oh, you have a model in your brain. I have lots of models in my brain. And I have no idea which ones work under which circumstances. And more than that, no one else does. And when you look at the research that was done by Pat Hinshaw and Roselle Whistler, that people mediate the way they mediate, regardless of the dispute, regardless of the disputant, they found something that works for them and they mediate that way all the time. Maybe the clients are picking well. It's certainly clear to me that the economic forces in the mediation world are dividing mediators into this form or this form or this form. They say evaluative and facilitative, but for the life of me, that doesn't mean anything. If you're the mediator and you're faced with the mediation and you know that the defendant's defense is useless, and you say, that defense isn't going to win, you're evaluative. And absolutely, you've made a decision. You're telling them what the law is, you're telling them what the result is. If you're facilitating, if you have the same information and say, how likely do you think a judge or a jury will buy the use of that law? And they come to the same result of probably not. You're facilitating, not evaluating. It's too high a level to make a decision about what someone is doing and why they're doing it. So my suggestion is let's look at the bricks and let's see where the bricks take us. And one of the things that's clear is that most of the time when we're being taught about mediation, especially if you're a lawyer, it is from a legal perspective. Duh, why not? But someone has chosen not to go to court. Someone has chosen not to delegate the decision to 12 people who don't know them and don't care about them, not to delegate it to a judge who has only one choice, which is to apply the law to the facts as he hears them. In mediation, there's more leeway. There are more degrees of freedom. And so to think that the law is going to dictate their decision misunderstands, doesn't get, in my personal opinion, how scary it is to a disputant to be in a mediation. There is so much at stake, and they're in control. It's their self-determination, and it's very, very scary. I know this because I've been a litigator in house counsel. I worked for an insurance company for 10 years, professional liability insurance, and I listened to architect, engineer, and contractor pour their hearts out to me on how scared they were. And I've even had the joy of being a disputant, which I'll tell you if you give me a very nice bottle of wine. So what is really facing them? The elephant in the room is human risk. This is what's going to drive them crazy. And in law school, at any time, did anyone tell you, teach you, help you learn how to handle human risk? Never. You either get it or you don't get it. They label it emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence was never taught in my law school. But then again, I'm old. Maybe it's taught nowadays, who knows? But the point of fact is, when I have two lawyers arguing in the middle of a mediation about one of the finer points of law, when they finish, I go, are you done? I must tell you, in the 40 years I've been mediating, I have never heard one lawyer turn to the other lawyer and say, oh my God, you're right. I'm wrong. You're so smart. I'm so stupid. You're a much better lawyer than I am or will ever be. Thank you for teaching me. Here's my client's wallet. Take as much as you want. Go for it. It's never happened, and it never will. And what turns the mediation around often is when the party trusts the mediator enough to give them internal information that no one could possibly know unless the person told the mediator him or herself. And it's once that internal information is shared that the strength and the power of mediation comes out. I'm telling you this because it's a hypothesis that I'm hoping bears weight when our side looks at it. And if it's wrong, I'll be the first in line to ask Jeff if I can do this again and tell him why I was wrong and give you my wallet and urge you to take as much money as you want. But let's see if it holds water. Let's see at least if common sense suggests there may be a there. When people have to make a decision about something of consequence, it's hard. If you have to decide what suit to wear to your wedding, what dress to wear to a prom, it takes a while, but it's reversible. It's easy. It's not that difficult, and it's not that important. But if it's important, most people go through a process. And one of the things I have found is all disputants go through this process, not only on the overarching issue, but even on the tiny issues. And one of the reasons I stress the importance of discovering, respecting, and honoring internal information is what makes people difficult is something going on inside of them that you don't know. You know, in so many textbooks, because I've read a lot in order to figure out what we were going to teach in our mediation course, they talk about difficult people, and invariably it's the disputant. And what do you do when they're emotional? And invariably they come up with it, take a break, do a caucus with the other side, close down the mediation, get yourself out of there, get some air, and try to figure out what to do. But there's another way of doing it. And this is what we're going to talk about right now. Any questions so far? I'm throwing you a lot of stuff. And if it's too much, please interrupt me with a question. Okay. The first thing to make a decision is you have to have a need to make a decision. If you're happy where you are, there's no issue here. So think about it this way. You have a disputant who was sued 5 years ago. And finally, their case has come to court. And finally, the judge says, why don't you try to mediate? 5 years, their case has kept them company. If they think they have a strong case, it's fed their dreams of candy canes popping in the air when the other person has to give them $1 billion. If they think their case is weak, it's totally and utter fear the entire time. But until they think there's a reason to move, they're going to stay with their fear or with their sugar plums because they don't know where to go. They don't know how to go. They don't know what to do. They're stuck. So I no longer think of impasse. I think of what stage is the person in, and then asking him, you seem to be stuck. What's sticking you? It's a different way. It's a kind of impasse prevention, so to speak, because everybody gets stuck all the time. But once they start recognizing they have a need to move, the second question is where? Where do I move? What are my options? Is there an option here in this mediation? Do I have a better BATNA? Is there something else I can do? You know, the settlement box is basically a box. Is there something outside of the settlement box I can do? What are my options? At that time, the media has a great chance to say, what are your options? And use introducing possibilities. Have you ever thought of this? What would happen if this? What about this? Could this work for you? In order to give the person creativity and greater degrees of freedom to explain by the mediator behavior that there are no rules here. Your future is yours. Let's figure out if we can get it the way you want it to be. So once they've evaluated options and they have one or two that they're really interested in, the next stage is concerns. What happens if I do it? And then they get stuck all over again because suddenly it's becoming real. And then all the doubts they have come floating into their brain. And unless those concerns are settled to their satisfaction, they'll never be able to make a decision they can live with because the fear of implementation is just so enormous in their head. So flip it. Instead of you thinking at any stage someone's being difficult, just think they're stuck. And instead of being afraid of emotion, start thinking of emotion as the energy required to make someone move. Energy, motion, emotion. And that unless they deal with that emotion, they're going to stay stuck. And it's always safer to say no than to say yes, because no is reversible. And yes, you're stuck with it. So think of it from their perspective, not from yours, because they're the ones that have to make a decision. It is their life, not yours. So what do I do when someone comes up to me and says, I don't know what to do? They're an evaluation of options. What do you think I should do? I usually say, I'm too busy messing up my own life to mess up yours. What's stopping you from making a decision? What's happening inside of you that you don't know what to choose? Or maybe you do know what to choose, but you're scared to tell anyone. Oh, if I tell my wife what I want to do, the wife is important in him reaching a decision. Should we bring the wife into the mediation? The degrees of freedom start opening because you're dealing with a real person with a real problem. Now you notice positions and interests aren't up here. We coded positions and interests. And by and large, we found out that most people were giving positions and most mediators were not asking about interests, which is probably why the article I wrote never found a publisher. And it took me a long time to realize why. I went to my reflective practitioner group and we spent the entire time figuring out, did we ask about interests? And none of us did. And the reason is if you ask about interests too early, you get positions. And then you're stuck with what they think is their interest, but it's really a position. And you don't know why they did it, and they don't know why they did it. And now you're stuck with another problem. You created the first one. So where do you go from there? And what we figured out in group is that we triangulate. We ask questions all the way along the way, take a little bit from here, and a little bit from there, and a little bit from there. Finally, when we have a sense of their interest, we say, you know, you said this, and you said this, and you said this. And I'm wondering, is this important to you? And then they're at the point when they're also ready to hear what their interests are. And they have two choices. They can say, wow, I never thought of it that way. Oh, well, then I'm glad I asked. Why hadn't you thought of it? What do you think of it now? Or if they say, no, that's not my interest, you can say, oh, I'm so glad I asked. Why not? Either way, you advance your understanding of them, and more important, they advance their understanding of themselves. And this is what helps movement go forward. Does that make sense? Any questions?
It does make sense, Ava. Can you put a little flesh on the bones and perhaps give an example of how that might work?
It's hard to give a mediation example where you're condemned to confidentiality. So if I could take it out of mediation and put it into something that everybody could recognize, which is you are in a job that you love. You just do. And your boss is getting ready to retire. The new person who's coming in may be wonderful or not, and you're really not sure. But you love the job, you love the future, and someone says, what are you going to do? I'm going to stay in my job. I love my job. I love the future. I love my pay. I'm happy. Then you meet the new guy, and suddenly you're not happy. And you go home and you say to your spouse, the new guy is never going to be my guy. I'm going to be doomed. I've got to get out. So you start evaluating options. Should you look elsewhere in the company? Should you look for a like situation? Maybe it's time for you to move. Your parents are getting old. Her parents are getting old. Should you look at her place, look at his place? Maybe you start thinking about these things. And then you go out and you start getting offers. And suddenly you say, you know, the new guy, I've worked with him 6 weeks. He doesn't seem that awful. Maybe we should stay put. Maybe we should move. And the wife has fears, and the children have fears, and you have fears. And your mother wants you to come to her place, and her mother wants you to go to the other place. And suddenly you're absolutely all confused about what to do until finally you have a very long talk with your wife, with everybody, and you reach a decision. And then you start thinking, how am I going to go about implementing it so that it ends up being a good decision? And one of the things that always has bothered me about mediation is so many mediators think that their job is done when the agreement is signed. And so they haven't done enough to make sure that the agreement is 100% implementable. When I worked for the insurance company, I asked my boss, Sprig Duval, if he would commit money to analyzing claims. And we brought in David Haviland from RPI, and he analyzed 10 years of claims, and we found out that most claims could be spotted in the contract. And that if you wanted to defeat problems, you had to have implementable contracts where hiding liability is not the issue, breeding success is. It's the same kind of issues here. How do you make a decision? So often lawyers are trying to think of how can I insulate my client from risk? And the client is thinking, you know, this may be a riskier road, but if I make it, it's going to be fantastic. And so there's a pull and push between the lawyer and the client, no matter the client and all of his family and everybody else he knows, as to what to go about doing it. And that's what freezes people until they can parse it out and make a decision. Does that help? So let's take it to the behaviors. Let's see what they are and how they help us. Oh, come on. Now, Ken talked about having two types of information. One are facts And the other one is internal information, statements about feelings, motives, concern. And I've been talking mostly about internal information because fact-based information gets you closer to court and internal information gets you closer to mediation. And the strength of mediation, it may make fun of confidentiality, is that it is confidential. And people can share their fears and get them resolved and build themselves a better future. So here are the behaviors. I want you to look at each one and think, 1, do I use this one? 2, why don't I use this one? 3, what would happen if I did use this one? Go through the whole decision-making process. What are the risks? Where should I try it out? And do try it out in your spare time, but not at a mediation. Try it in a low-stakes situation. Try it in your family. Try it everywhere else until it becomes more comfortable to you and you can use it in the mediation setting. So first, think about all those things after, but right now, think about how could I use this to help the disputant manage the risk inherent in their reaching a decision. So initiating, we broke it down. We broke it down because there are at least 2 models of mediation. One are mediation models where the mediator is more concerned with process and procedures and leaves the substance of the content more or less to the parties and their lawyers. And the other are mediators who are hired to settle the case. That's what they were hired for. And so they're going to be doing a lot more proposing of substance and content. And then there are people who kind of go one way or the other way, depending upon the needs of the client, depending on the needs of the situation, depending upon what they need to learn, and they do it by introducing possibilities. I personally use introducing possibilities a lot. What would happen if I have an idea? Just play with it. Just play with me for a while. Let's see where it takes us. Maybe a good idea, maybe a stupid idea. Let's see where it goes. We'll learn something just by the process of nibbling it through. I do that all the time because by and large in that process, I can learn what the interests of the parties are without labeling them. I can understand where their value system is without labeling them. It gives me more freedom than ever to help someone work out their issues by my understanding how they view possibilities. I mean, after all, possibilities have no risk. They don't exist. And people are much more willing to talk about possibilities than they are about their situation. Reacting? Same, we didn't mess with this. There were really only 3 that we could figure out. Agreeing, either with substance or with person. That's a great idea. I wish I had thought of it. Disagreeing, some people actively disagree, but it's a stupid idea and I'm not going to go there, which gives room for defend attack. Oh yeah, you think my idea is stupid? Let me tell you how stupid your idea was. And what was interesting in coding and observing, in Michigan, we found out that out of the 30, whatever number we did, nobody reacted. And we said to the head of the program, have you trained your people not to react? And he said, yes, because once you start reacting, you lose neutrality and people stop trusting you. And so we never react at all. And I said, but there's a downside to not reacting. People don't feel that they've been heard. People don't feel that you care. People don't feel that you understand them. They get scared because your low reacting has made them think they're talking to a wall. He said, but we teach them other behaviors. And with great, enormous joy, we learned, come on, that his other behaviors included, ready? You find it, clarifying. And what he did on clarifying is used like everybody else, giving information, facts, and feelings, but he kept on saying feelings are as important as facts, or sometimes more important, or seeking information, facts, or feelings. I said, but how does that help the vacuum? He said, oh, the vacuum gets helped by these behaviors. Sure enough, testing, understanding, acknowledging, and summarizing. Testing understanding can be used in so many different ways. I have been brilliant in explaining this to you. I'm going to test for understanding. Do any of you have any idea what I'm talking about? That's testing understanding. And if you all say yes, I go, oh, good. What do you understand? And then I find out for myself what you understand. And if you got it right, say, wow, I didn't know I was that articulate. And if you got it wrong, I say, wow, I'm glad I asked because I clearly did mess it up. Let me try again. And that's one way of making sure they understand you. Or you can do it the other way. You've been talking for quite a while and what you're saying is important to you. And therefore it's important to me. May I test to make sure I get it? Are you saying this and this and this and this? And two answers can come out. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Oh, good, I'm glad I asked. Or no, you don't get it. Oh boy, am I glad I asked. Would you try me again? Don't give up on me. It's important to you. It's important to me. Help me. What am I missing? And it is a way, again, of building common ground, building trust, building understanding, and of lowering risk. Now, acknowledging came from a friend of mine in, oh, please, why am I blocking on his name? Because he's so wonderful. And he said, you don't have acknowledging in there. So we went back and recoded and recoded and coded until we found out lots of people use acknowledging. Acknowledging is akin to agreeing, but there's no agreement. It is saying clearly, you are angry. I am acknowledging that. Not that you have a right to be angry, not that you should be angry, not that it's bad to be angry, it's hard to be angry, just acknowledging anger. Just confirming that you heard the person and you heard what they're going through and you're giving it respect than anybody's feeling it deserves. Acknowledging is very powerful. And summarizing is pulling it all together. Let me see if I heard you all correctly. You said this and you said that, which made me wonder if there was common ground on this. And when I asked you both about it, there was. And you have agreed to do A, B, and C. Am I right on the summary? Do I have it right? Am I listening well? Is it what you want? It is a way of empowering the people to switch lanes, to push over a little bit to the right, over a little bit to the left, until there's common ground both of them want to live on. So there are also process behaviors, bringing in and shutting out. When you're doing stuff in group, Ken, you've been quiet for a while. What are you thinking about what I'm saying? Is there any disagreement between your view of our research and mine? Or shutting out, Ken, they heard you last week, this is my time. Or usually what a shout out is, often caused by overwhelming excitement about what someone just said. Oh yeah, you're right, and we can do this too. Building on the idea of another. All these behaviors are going on in group. But the one that we think most produces trust and is most useful to mediators and to the parties is labeling behavior. Labeling behavior, you say what you're going to do next, right? I have a question to ask, boom, ask your question. I have proposals to make, boom, state your proposal. I think there's a possibility that we should all explore. If you give me a moment, let me tell you what the possibility is, boom, tell the possibility. Labeling your behavior lowers the risk for everybody. You know what they're listening for and why they're listening. And they can see that you're basically transparent. You're not going around with them. You're not manipulating them. You're basically saying, this is what I'm going to do, and you're doing it. The idea came from Neil's research, but the importance of it came from two places. One from Michael Moffat's article on transparency and the need for people to be able to know where you're coming from. And the other is from a student who said, you know, this labeling behavior is powerful. I went home last night and there was a fight at the table, and I'm always the mediator between my siblings. And I said, give me a second because I want to label my behavior right now. And they went, what's labeling behavior? And I explained it to them. They all started picking up. It's very hard to fight when you say, I want to beat you up first. It doesn't happen. It kind of lowered the tone of everything. And we started talking to each other instead of yelling at each other. So that is another behavior that I think you might want to consider using. So here are the takeaways. Let me answer questions first. Jeff, do you have any questions, Jean?
Yes, when you're talking about labeling behavior, Ava, are you talking about, as a mediator, labeling your own behavior or trying to help others label theirs or offering labels for theirs? I didn't quite
No.
cover that.
Labeling your own behavior. When someone else's behavior is labeled, if you've got it wrong, which is so much a possibility, you've basically insulted the person or annoyed the person or worse, got them angry. So I never judge personally in a mediation. And I want to talk about that for a second. I've been telling you how I mediate, which is a weakness of my education. And it's due to the fact that mediation is confidential. You can't sit in and watch how other people mediate. You watch films, but those are not real mediations, it's actors. And so I can only use me as quote unquote a norm, but it is a style. It is my style. And if it's not your style, I don't want you thinking, oh, I listened to her and I can't do it and I'm bad. No, develop your own style. Look at the communication behaviors and figure how you can use them consistent with your style and consistent with the needs of the parties so that you can help them move. Do you think that answers the question?
Is it possible to give another example or elaborate on the examples of what a mediator might say or do, labeling their own behavior?
Yeah, I always say, may I test for understanding? So the person knows that I'm testing for understanding. So mediation, and it's two pros, and they pick up your use of communication behaviors. They pick up the labels, and one of them says to the other one, I'd like to test for understanding. And she said, she's had an impact, go ahead. And he asked this question, and then based upon her answer, they sorted it out and they moved it forward. You don't own these behaviors. The parties can use them too, and they pick them up so rapidly. One of my favorite disputants said to me one day, you used to ask me questions all the time. And I thought, gee, she's a dumb broad. And then I realized you ask them because I don't know the answers. So I started to welcome the questions and they got me moving. So I left out with that guy. Another person said to me, every time I want to do something, you ask a question and you throw me off. Stop asking questions. How do you like it? You go both ways. So it's almost time for takeaways. So let me go to these. Here are the first ones. Mediation may begin with me, but it is not about you. I have always wanted to say that. And Jeff, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to say it. I'm going to be bounced from the ABA any day now. Please, please, please put your issue of a non-agreement off the table and keep it there. It doesn't matter whether you settle the case. It's not your case to settle. It's the party's case to settle. And they can choose, even stupidly choose, not to. It is their life, their problem, their consequences, not yours. And I wish for the life of me that people would stop asking win-loss rates, because what does it say if you win all the time? I don't know. At all time, keep the disputants' needs, their fears, their risks, and their implementation needs foremost in your thinking. Put them first. And if they're not putting their needs first, raise and form. I'm not sure I understand what you need it for. I know it's important, you've said it twice, but I don't understand why. And I can't help you if I don't understand you. Would you mind explaining to me? Help them understand themselves so they make better decisions. And ask questions. And when you test for understanding, please, please, please get sign off that you understood them. In my own classes, I banned, I see, I get it, I got, that's all about you. Doesn't mean a damn thing about whether you understood the person or not. Just your egoism saying, I heard you, I got it. Ask questions, test understanding, and get sign off that you understood. Your goal is shared clarity, not a specific results. Disputants created the problem, give them the opportunity to design their own future. And don't think I'm brilliant on designing their own future. I was lecturing to the EEOC, and I said to one of them, I said, all right, I've answered all your questions. Here's mine. How do you guys settle a discrimination case? And he said, we don't look at the past, we look at the future, and we help them design their own future. But it's a great gift to give to somebody. You may be mired now, There's more out there for you. Let's design that. Let's see where it takes you. And last, think of the communications as mediation tools and not as rules. Think strategically before you open your mouth. How will what behavior comes out of my mouth help the party's progress? I mean, we're talking about mindfulness all the time nowadays. Inhale, exhale. Be mindful about what leaves your mouth and choose how you want to communicate. Think all the time how it will be heard. I'll give an example of that if I have time. The whole issue of Joe's over here and Mary's over there and $1 million is standing between them has been discussed in some pretty great books. My favorite one is about getting money to talk, because money is indeed language. But the way I hear when I go over there and tell them I want that, I go, why that? I need a reason. The reason has to be truthful. It has to be compelling and believable. Why? What reason? Is this truthful, compelling, believable? And if they don't believe it, how do you think they're going to react? And what number do you think they're going to come back with? And then what are you going to do? And then what do you think is going to happen? And given what you just told me, do you still want to go forward with the number that you had at the beginning? And that's kind of thinking is not what's taught either us in law school or any human being in daily living. But words have consequences. They impact. As important as what you have to say is, how you say it often is substantially more important than what you say. And communication behaviors should help you be more thoughtful. Gives you many more choices, 14 choices instead of 3 to communicate. And that's pretty powerful. The whole idea is to increase your degrees of freedom. And this is one way to do it. So this is from Ken's slide. It's 100% believable by everybody on this process. It is so much easier for people to persuade themselves. That's why building works. You're not going to walk away from an idea that you generated. That's why building works. And we saw no evidence of building anywhere in any of the mediations we observed. So there are all kinds of powerful tools available. They're not being taught in school, and therefore they're not available to you. And what we're hoping is that the research will either find them true, so they'll start being taught in school, find them false, and come up with better answers that increase your degrees of freedom even more. So that's what we're doing, and we're inviting all of you to join. Try them out. Email me what the result is. Feel free to email RSI or Ken Webb. All of us are interested. And if you want to know more, these are the books that gave me the power to move from being an assistant U.S. attorney, move from being a vice president of an insurance company, to understand that there are a lot of other ways of doing business and moving words around on a piece of paper. And that's that for me. So,
Ava, thank you. That was a tremendous presentation with a lot of insights that I know everyone appreciates. Your last slide reminded me of the apocryphal fortune cookie saying, you don't have to work very hard to convince someone of the wisdom of their own ideas. Right?
but that's so true. That is
Yeah. So you mentioned the concept of building towards the end of your presentation. What what did you mean by that, and how can we implement that strategy?
Building on the idea of another is such a wonderful way of getting to yes. Somebody says, I think we should move. Yeah, that's a great idea. Where do you want to move? I'd like to move to that town. Really, I'd love to move over there in that town. Can we go look for houses there first? You're taking their idea of moving to that town and you're building on it by saying, let's look at this location. So what you're doing is you're either improving it, or if there's a problem, you're raising it as a problem and inviting them to help cure it, so that you're constantly building on making an idea more and more implementable. And once it is implementable, substantially less risks to all sides, then people are willing to go forward.
It sounds very much like the idea in improvisation in books by Viola Spolin, yes, and.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. It's yes and. Right.
Okay, we have a few minutes before we ask others to pose questions. I see Ken Webb, who presented for us last week, and you built a lot on Ken's presentation, the concepts there. Ken, let me give you an opportunity. Would you like to build on anything, take a minute and build on anything that Ava discussed this morning?
I appreciate the opportunity, Jeff. I would really be struggling to come up with a build on what she's presented, because I think what she presented was pretty clear, added a lot of detail to it and examples, which I thought were just really, really helpful. So I can't build on perfection. Great job, Ava.
Thank you very much. A little bit of full disclosure here. He rejected my presentation yesterday and said, be more specific. And I'm glad I passed. Yes.
Well, Ava, do you have any questions for Ken?
No.
Okay. Jean, comments, thoughts?
Well, I just loved it. Thank you so much. I really have no questions. I've been taking little screenshots with my phone so I can contemplate about them when I'm on a plane later today. But thank you so much. This has been fascinating. I'm sure, does anybody else have a question or a comment for Ava? You go ahead and raise your hand or unmute yourself and speak up. We've had, well, we're 64 people. We were up to 70 people here at the height.
Just unmute yourself and pose your question, please.
I guess it's a comment from me. First, Ava, thank you. Very enlightening. Second, you kept bringing me back to my training, which was by a non-lawyer actually, for mediation for both domestic cases and general civil cases. But her mantra was often suspend judgment, get curious.
Absolutely.
So thank you for reinforcing and building that out in so many concrete ways.
Ava, let me ask you another question. The idea of focusing on resolution and clarity, in the sense that a photographer might say the image has a high degree of resolution or high degree of clarity. Sometimes there's a sense that conflicts with the demands of the marketplace, where the closer, right? That's what's in demand. Who closes the deal? Who gets the deal done? Who gets you into the end zone? How do you reconcile your perspective on mediation, the view of clarity as the goal, with what are sometimes the demands of the marketplace, that it's the closer who gets the business?
With all due respect to you, Jeff, can I flip this to Ken, who has been teaching sales for 150 years? And by and large, the whole concept of closing was disproved in a book called Spin Selling. Would you answer his question for me?
Well, it's a very intriguing question, and it's, I think at the end of the day, it's less about, we have seen people utilizing the same amount of time much more effectively rather than taking more time for clarity. In other words, seeking clarity in an effective way actually optimizes the same amount of time versus taking more time. But how many times in a business development or sales interaction have we as the customer or client left something that was closed, but then didn't kind of feel as good about it as we would have liked? And in mediation, that has significant consequences in terms of longevity or sustainability of whatever was agreed upon. So in summary, what I'm saying is, believe it or not, we're making more effective use of the same amount of time, not taking more time, which I think would help with the reality of what the market demands, Jeff. Excellent question.
Taking it out of sales and putting it into mediation, I have long believed that mediators cause impasse by seeking to close a deal and not working for shared clarity as to what the problem is and ways to solve it, not generating creativity that will energize everybody and make them all willing to come to yes and to come to an agreement they want to implement. And had they better sales skills and know that you don't go for closing, you go for solving problems in a way that everyone wants to implement the agreement, they end up causing impasse. And there are other ways they do it too. And I'm hoping that in time, the research will prove that out so that people could stop causing impasse. You know, there's no articles on how mediators cause impasse. All the articles on impasse are how awful people are. How bad lawyers and bad disputants all cause the impasse. I don't believe it for a second.
Well, I understand that, Ava, and many times my sense is that trying to make somebody understand, you know, when one side says to you, go down the hall and make them understand with that staccato finger, going down the hall and trying to jam it in like that only produces resistance.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
No different with adults than it is with children.
Absolutely. And indeed, someone asked me said, you're the perfect mediator for this case. It's a construction case. You've been in construction for 30 years. You take this case. All you have to do is take him to the woodshed and beat the hell out of him until he sees that we're right. And I said, and when he stops laughing, what am I supposed to do? And he said, what? And I said, I can't beat anybody up. I wouldn't want to. I can't do it. I choose not to. And he said, well, then maybe you're not right for this mediation. And I said, oh, yeah. The market chooses what the market wants. They're not always thoughtful.
And I guess the silver lining of it all is that we live in a big economy and a marketplace for mediation services that has gotten so much larger with the advent of Zoom, where we're no longer limited by geography to the extent we once might have been. And that whatever your particular style is, your particular approach, the marketplace, particularly if you view it as a national or even international marketplace, the marketplace has enough people to keep all of us busy, no matter what our approach. And with that, friends, we remind you, if you're in a position to do so, please contribute to Bread for the City in the Washington, D.C. area in Ava's honor. That's breadforthecity.org, breadforthecity.org. And as Jean just mentioned in the chat, if you're kind enough to let Jean or me know about the contribution, we'll be very happy to add it to our running total. Ava Abramowitz, that's great. Ken Webb, thank you so much for the assist. And
Thank you, Jeff.
And with that, friends, we are complete.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Great job.
Yes, thank you. I will just say next week, same time, same place, the guest will be John Palmer, who's the Corporate Vice President and Deputy General Counsel of Microsoft, and it will be our 3-year anniversary. And so it's sure to be another great presentation. Thank you all. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.